Well, there were different aspects of it. So it wasn't Nigeria that was bought by the British.
Okay.
The British had control of some parts of Nigeria.
Yeah.
So rather than continually deal with them as a company, the country decided that let's take it over, are you with me, and pay the company off.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Candid Convos with me, Chiwete Onyema. Today we'll place our focus on our dear country, Nigeria. Now, a country that is over 60 years old with a population of more than 200 million people. Two major issues have been plaguing this country: corruption and tribalism. And today we're going to have a conversation about the concept of Nigeria. Joining me to have a conversation is a chartered accountant, an author, and a public affairs analyst, and someone who is very, very passionate about our country, Nigeria. Uade joins me right now. Uade, hello, and thanks for joining me.
Hello, Chiwete. It's great to be here.
Okay, so, this conversation is something we should have had for quite some time. We have it on the side, actually, but it's only good that we have this conversation right now. Now, there's a lot to look at when you look at the history of Nigeria, right? But let me just go back to the very beginning, and that is the amalgamation. Do you think we're forced to be a nation? Meaning, when I say forced, I mean two people, they just woke up and realized that they've merged us together. There was no permission per se from both parties to say, okay, do you want to be together? It was just a case of it looked like we woke up and we've become a country, North and South.
Is there really a country in the world that hasn't been forced to be a country of different people? When you look at the United Kingdom, made up of 4 different countries.
Yeah.
If you look at the United States, it's made up of people who are Irish, Italian, German, native Indians. So when people say, were we forced to become a nation, I always ask myself, do you force people to become nations? No. What happens is people who conquer other people decide they want to set up a nation. And the way most times they do that is those who are the conquered usually are the oppressed. Invariably, or the ones who do the hard work. So you come back to the 80-20 rule, which is what life is really about. So I don't think we're forced to be a nation. I think the circumstances that brought about Nigeria being amalgamated was the simple fact that you had regions that were within a context of space, and they were being controlled by the British Empire. So rather than say, oh, have this, let's bring all those places together so that we can manage those resources as one from a center point, and then we can now decide how we move those things from left to right. Otherwise, the British could have just left it. Now, what could have happened at independence, like it happened with India and Pakistan, and subsequently Bangladesh, is it could have broken up those nations. However, sometimes you also have to look at what are the economies of scale in terms of breaking those nations. Does it benefit you, who is the colonialist or the colonizer, or does it benefit the individuals, or does that amalgamation or a combination of those three, being in one, being managed better, become more economically viable as a unit? And those are the things you need to look at. So when you look at places like the United Kingdom, even the United States, where there was a civil war over slavery, that combination of people, are you with me, from an economic standpoint, plays out to the politics of what happens every time in a country.
Okay, so would you say, because there's also the belief, or when we look at it, the amount of money spent because Nigeria, of course, was said to have been bought from a particular company, in quote, by the British. Looking at that idea or that move being made, would you say Nigeria was actually just set up for profit, basically for business, as opposed to other reasons?
Well, there were different aspects of it. So it wasn't Nigeria that was bought by the British.
Okay.
The British had control of some parts of Nigeria. And then I think the British, I can't remember the real name, had control of some parts. So rather than continually deal with them as a company, the country decided that let's take it over, are you with me, and pay the company off. And then it becomes one. Now the government of the British Empire would now control in its entirety what you call Nigeria today. Are you with me?
Yes.
And that's what brought about the amalgamation in 1914. So, yes, maybe people didn't like it, but let's also remember that when people say, oh, Nigeria is made up of, is a country that was formed with one husband and three wives. That's not true. Nigeria is a country, are you with me, that has one husband and maybe 700 wives.
Oh, that's giving Solomon, isn't it?
Well, maybe that was the wise man who decided that, okay, I would manage this my 700 wives or concubines, as you may put it, and try as much as possible from an economic point of view and also from a political point of view, make it sustainable so that the resources that come out of it would be useful to me, the husband. And I think that's what the British just did.
Okay, so let's moving from amalgamation now, let's talk independence. Some people say, looking at how we've come now, some are claiming that it was too early. Do you think so? Do you think our independence was too early?
Wow. It's a funny question, because even before the British, before the amalgamation or the British control, you had different kinds of governance and independence. Are you with me?
Yeah.
Within these regions. And even before the independence, there were parliamentary systems already running. Someone like Obafemi Awolowo had become the premier of the Western region, meaning that he was in charge of the day-to-day. He was the chief executive officer of the Western region.
Yeah.
Someone like, I think, Nnamdi Azikiwe and Amadu Bello. Are you with me? So when you now say independence was too early, are you saying that those people who ran those places between 1952 and 1959 under a parliamentary system that had independence for each region were not good enough for them to now come together in 1960 as one country? That's the question you need to ask yourself and answer. But I think they were. Now, let's always remember that politics is a game of numbers, and people play those things towards ensuring that you're able to garner the support of more people than your opponents. And I think what has happened, and I think who you call the founding fathers of Nigeria, the biggest mistake that was made was that you built politics around whether it's ethnicity or religion, which for me, it's not a bad thing because you want to get people together. But at the end of the day, it has happened that people tend to forget that the most important thing was, what was the economic benefit to the people who were managing the country as Nigeria between 1952 and 1950, between the 1952 and 1959 parliament before the independence.
Okay, so why some people, I've heard some people talk about it and say, look, it looks like we were too early to have or to go about independences when we compare probably our country to maybe a country like South Africa, who got their independence way like years after, right? You can look at the level of development and we can see that there's quite a gap between, say, Nigeria and South Africa, but that's not the conversation now. And also want something that people held on to say, oh, this is also a sign that perhaps maybe we got our independence too early, was the Civil War happening just about 6 years after independence. Okay,
so let's not make a mistake. And before we get to the Civil War, I remember there were 2 regions in Nigeria in 1960 at independence.
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yes.
Western, Northern, and Eastern region. Do you remember that there was a 4th region in 1963? The Midwestern region.
Yes.
How do you think it came about? It came about from the Act of Parliament. Oh, you're looking at me, you're surprised. And there was a referendum, and there was a vote. So it wasn't just the Parliament woke up one day and said, oh, let's create Midwestern region. No. There was a referendum. People went out to vote. I can remember, if you go through your history or you go through Google and count it,
yes,
close to 700 or 600, almost 1 million people voted. And it was a resounding, yes, create the Midwestern state. But let me also say this. In that referendum, for that referendum to pass, they had 2/3 of parliament pass that. So when people talk about the issue of 2/3, and I wrote an article not too long ago on LinkedIn about me understanding 2/3, it came really from 1979. But the fact of it is that 2/3 of parliament passed an act or voted for an act for the creation of the Midwestern region in 1963. It wasn't done by the premier of the Western region or the premier of the Northern region or the premier of the Eastern region. It was done by a combination of Nigerians in parliament who voted and said, go carry out a referendum. If that referendum had been lost, there won't be a Midwestern region. It's the same way today that the British did Brexit and they are out of Europe. So we need to come back to the realities of how and learn about the history of Nigeria from 1960. When people throw these things around like, oh, the creation of state is a military thinking. Oh, let's just divide it. And I'm sorry to say that, but that's the reality. Someone by fiat, not by the people. Let's always remember this. For you to create something, Yugoslavia, after the war, became 4 countries. It wasn't by fiat. It was by people agitating that let's break it up. They were 1 country. They fought each other and killed each other.
Yeah.
And it turned out to become 4. Because people now decided, maybe it's time to go our separate ways. But it must be by the people, not by the fiat of 1 person. Now coming to the Civil War, the question you asked, it's funny. Are you with me? There's nowhere in the world that I can remember that military rule really has ever done the right thing. Whether it's in South America, whether it's in Africa, even in Asia.
Even in Niger right now and Burkina Faso, they're not doing the right thing.
First and foremost, are they the people that the people ruling, or the people ruling? Because they're not administering, they're ruling.
Okay.
They are ruling by fiat,
Yes.
decrees. Were they elected by the people?
No, they weren't.
Exactly. The people wake up one morning and someone is thrust upon them by himself and says, oh, I'm the new ruler of this country. Even when you had kingdoms, are you with me? The people knew who was going to be the next king or the next queen.
No, but they didn't have to choose that.
Yeah, but they knew.
So, well, that's a case of family.
No.
We don't know if he's going to be qualified for it or not.
That's not true. Not all lineages, are you with me?
Yes.
Are based on family or direct descendant of families.
But the people didn't choose.
But it doesn't matter. But the people were aware. They didn't just wake up one morning and then they found out that King Charles was king. Neither was Queen Elizabeth. Now, even if that's what the tradition is and the culture, are you with me? People have an understanding of what leadership and how leadership is going to transit. I don't just wake up one morning and then at 6 o'clock I hear martial music and then curfews are on the road. You can't go out, you can't do anything. That's authoritarian, in my opinion.
Okay, so when we look at the reason given, when it comes to what led to the civil war now, a group of soldiers who felt as at that time we had corrupt leaders decided to take them out to, make sure that our country is in better hands. It looks like that's similar to what we have now, whereby we're still talking about corrupt leaders.
So, okay, that's true. So what's corruption? Is where either one person or a group of people or an entity, are you with me?
Yeah.
Decide to take what belongs to so many others just for themselves. And yes, we've gone through that. And let's remember that corruption is not a Nigerian word. Corruption has existed forever. If you read the Bible,
Of course.
are you with me? Samuel.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was Samuel who anointed David. God cursed his children. Abi? Because they were taking the things of...
That's Eli.
Okay, so that was Eli. Thank you for correcting me.
Okay.
Now, Eli's children, were they corrupt?
Were they corrupt? Yes, they were.
Exactly. And that's my point, because they were taking things that belonged to everybody.
Yeah.
And that was the issue. And that's always been an issue. And it's not only in Nigeria, it's across politics all over the world. However, are you with me? There must be development. When I was growing up, you would hear that, I used to hear this saying, are you with me? The 10% man. And then as I grew older, you heard that, in Nigeria, it was the 90% man.
Yeah.
Yeah. And these are people that deal politics all across the world. Asia is what it is today because of the 10% man. Are you with me? So you take 10% and 90% goes into the system. And that's what really is. Now, was that what was done when the military took over? Or was it just an excuse for those? And let's also remember, what is the role of the military? To provide or to defend the security, the lives and to provide security for the lives and people, and defend the nation against aggression. The nation, not themselves, not carry those defense expectations and turn it against the nation, which is, in my opinion, what they did.
Okay.
Are you with me? Was it right or wrong? Well, they had their reasoning. But in my own opinion, it was treason. And what is treason? And even in military parlance, treason is even worse in military parlance than in civilian parlance. Because the late Chief Obafemi Awolowo, do you know he went to jail?
Yes, he was. He was.
For what? Sedition.
Yes.
And what is sedition? It's treason. He was jailed for 10 years. They said he instigated. Exactly. So what did the military do? They instigated action against Nigeria out of their own whims and caprices and decided that, these Nigerians are corrupt, so we should take over. No, that's not your role. Your role was to defend the nation against all those things, not to take one side, your side, so that you could enjoy the reins of power. And that's how I say it.
So when we look at now, I hear you when you talk about the fact that civilians, the military is supposed to defend, while your civil or civilian leaders are supposed to ensure that they put the right things. But when we look at infrastructure in Nigeria right now, it looks as though we had better days. Remember, infrastructure, we had better days under the military than what we have now.
So you think,
rule, based on infrastructure.
So you think. That's what I'm telling you. Have you read the whole history of Nigeria? Nigeria's infrastructure development, are you with me, has been much better under civilian governance. Because there is a process. And if you don't follow that process and you do fiat, and I'll give you a very good example.
Yeah.
The Lagos that I live in and I was born in and has been my home for the last 55 years. We always have this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about let's talk about schools in Lagos. Most of the schools in Lagos were founded when?
Okay, I don't
aside from the old ones, I'm not talking about the CMS and the.
Okay,
they were founded in 1980 by who? The civilian government under Jakonde. The Lekki Expressway that today you call, and for the last 20 years we've been adding one lane, 20 years. It was built in 2 years by who? A civilian government. The Third Mainland Bridge, everybody calls the IBB Bridge. It was initiated and built up to where? It was built up to Adekunle by who? The federal government of Nigeria in conjunction with Lagos State. So when people say these things, why? Because the military come in, are you with me? And what has been conceived, are you, from a governance perspective?
Yeah. And
who runs government? Has anybody ever sat back and understood who runs government? Government is run by the civil servants. It's not the minister or the president. It's run by those in the civil service, those who go there every day, who toil for Nigeria, who toil for their countries. To do what? Put policies in place, ensure those policies are properly administered. So when we continue to take governance as the executive or the legislature or the judiciary, we tend to forget that there are people who make up the system to let these people carry out these functions. Mm-hmm. What happens to them? And if that has been destroyed and bastardized, which in my opinion the military did.
Or do you think
I did.
They spoiled the civil service?
They did.
How did
And
how
it
did
started
they
in
do that?
1975.
Okay.
After the coup by Muritala Mohammed, where people woke up in the morning and they lost their jobs. They had not done 25 years or 30 years then, before it was moved to 35. They had not attained the age of 50. or was it 60? I can't really remember. But Nigeria was a growing country. And people, once you did that, there's a particular one he mentioned, and it was in the news in 1999, and we've had this discussion before. Philip Asiodu.
Yes.
There's a decree that was written that Philip Asiodu should never work for the Nigerian government again. His name was written on that decree. So when people don't...
Why was his name written there? Did he do something?
They said he was a corrupt permanent secretary. This was the Muritala Obasanjo regime. And in 1999, guess who invited him to be a special advisor? I'm asking you. Who?
Obasanjo.
Exactly. He had forgotten that they signed a decree with the man's name. How many years after that?
That's,
24 years?
Yeah, thereabout.
Exactly. So you see how short span it is. We can't build a country, are you with me, when we continue to look at short-termism. Governance is a system. The Lagos Metro line that was destroyed, unfortunately, or was conceived, and that's what brought about some of the biggest debt problems that you said Obasanjo cleared in 1999, 2000.
Yeah.
$600 million of infrastructure that was supposed to come into Lagos. The metro line, road, which included the Third Mainland Bridge, which included the Fourth Mainland Bridge that I've been here since I was 10. Now, so when we choose not to tell the history, are you with me? Or people choose to tell the history that benefits the way they want it to go, then we have a problem. So the military, for me, has been a system, in my opinion, that has come in to jeopardize a young baby, are you with me, you kill the parents and then decide that this is how the baby must grow. And that's what was done in 1966, in my own opinion. Although some people will tell you, oh, it was this tribe or that tribe or not this tribe. But let's remember that the second largest command in Nigeria in 1966, and they were part of the people that called the coup, was manned by who? Do you know?
That's the major military command in Nigeria at that time.
In the north. The second largest military command. And it was the largest military command in the north. It was manned by who? Who was their commander?
I can't remember.
Ojukwu.
Okay.
But he's the one that called the coup. He started the quelling of the coup. So when people say, oh, but perceptions can be very dangerous. And you remember what I said? Awolowo went to jail for it. He was sentenced to jail, I think it was 1963 or so, for 10 years for sedition, which is treason. And in military parlance, when you plan a coup that is not successful, is what? It's treason.
Yes.
And what should you do?
You should also be...
you should follow the process of the military, which is court-martial.
Court-martial,
Exactly. Now, when you start to have perceptions that things don't seem the way they are, then people start to raise different things. And one of the biggest antagonists of that, they needed to do a reprisal coup in 1966 that happened in July, was the late head of state of Nigeria, Muritala Muhammad. Because if you ask, although maybe nobody will ever tell you that, but he was one of the biggest antagonists of saying, there must be a reprisal coup. Why? Because they felt, and it was a feeling, that Aguiyi Ironsi was not doing what he was meant to do. And I was having a conversation with a friend this morning, and I said the same thing. When people start to have the perception that, you say, they are carrying out investigations, like we've seen in Nigeria, and we've had this discussion. Today, their panel is blue paper. It starts with, is it blue? Or is it white? Then it goes to blue. Then it goes to green, which is the final one. And at the end of the day, 3 years is down the line. And when people start to have that kind of perception, there's no information being passed on. This is where we are. These are the things that have happened. These are the people that we've seen. Or these are the things that we've observed. Nobody hears anything. 2 years now, the minister that is still being investigated. You remember that minister?
Which one?
That has been dropped.
That's been drawn. Oh, okay, yes. Edu, yeah, Edu.
Is it?
The lady, yeah.
Yeah.
The female
So
minister.
what has happened?
Better Edu, yeah, that's the name. Better
What
Edu.
has happened? When last did you hear about the investigation?
I mean, that has been our story for quite some time.
And that's that. And you see, so you can see why I made reference to that, because in 1966, if 6 months after the coup, are you with me? People felt that the head of state then was not acting, or didn't seem to act, or they were not even providing enough information towards who were the culprits behind it.
Yeah.
Are you with me? Then you have this kind of situation. Now, the second part of it is this: where you feel, or where people feel, not where you feel, where people feel that it was just a segment, or it was a segment of the country,
that got affected.
No, it was just some parts of the country that got affected. One segment, all of a sudden, nothing happened to their leaders. Do you understand? Of course, what kind of message do you think you will be passing? So people need to understand these things. And perception is people's reality. And that's what they saw. And then the reprisal coup came in July of 1966.
66, yeah.
I think it was July 15 or something.
Yeah.
Or late July. And then Gowon took over on August 1.
Yeah.
Exactly. And ever since, everybody has said, oh, it's an Igbo coup. I don't think it was just Igbo people that were involved in the coup, because Major Banjo, who later on fought in the civil war on the side of the Biafrans, before he was now, let me tell you Major Banjo's story just briefly.
Yeah.
Banjo, according to Ojukwu, during the Biafran war, because he was executed, he was tried, he was court-martialed. They said he was planning a coup. And within a month or two, he was tried, he was found guilty, and he was executed. But he was fighting on the Biafran front because he was in jail in the East.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, if in 2 months,
Yes.
that was done, and then in 6 months, one person who takes over the reins of leadership, nobody seems to think that anything is being done, then the perception starts to come. Oh, maybe he was part of it. Maybe the people who came from that side, are you with me?
Yeah.
Who were not killed were also part of it. And it creates a monster, which is what we have today. And I know I've always told you, the biggest problem of Nigeria came January 15, 1966. Are you with me?
Yeah.
And when the Kaduna Nzogu led coup, and let me also say this to you, he killed the man who brought him up.
That's Kaduna Nzogu.
Yes.
That he
killed the Sadauna.
Yeah. Amadu Bello.
Exactly.
And that's the man that brought him up.
Yes. He lived in his house. He grew up in his house. Did anybody ever tell you that? Did you ever know that?
No.
Exactly. And I can remember a statement. If you go to YouTube, you see a statement. He said he was hiding behind his family, like something. And he shot him. Now, what do you want me to think? If you were in the Sadauna's children's shoes, what would you think? And that's perception.
Now, talking about perception, when the civil war rather was done, in Gowon's words, he declared no victor, no vanquished. Is that really what happened? Because I feel like a certain region in the country, without mincing words here, the southeastern part of the country still feel like they're left out. And ever since then, we hear talks about IPOB and them wanting to create another country.
Unfortunately, we hear those talks.
Do you really think it was no victor, no vanquished?
Well, there's no. So let's always remember one thing. There is no word that there is no victor, no vanquished.